Hello, this is going to be a video tutorial going over how we can create surfaces in Civil 3D and then how to alter the appearance of those surfaces so that it can represent the information that we want it to. So Civil 3D, obviously it's very similar to AutoCAD, the interface. You maneuver through it the same way. You can zoom in and zoom out by scrolling. There's a command bar down here that you can type into. You can draw in a very similar, draw and modify in the same way that you would in AutoCAD. The difference is that Civil 3D is more focused on doing three-dimensional drawings. So like for materials class, we used AutoCAD for plans and sections. Here we will use Civil 3D mostly for surfaces. I like to think of it like Rhino, how you can draw two-dimensionally in Rhino, but it's also really good for making surfaces and and working three-dimensionally. So that's what we'll be using Civil 3D for in this class, for building surfaces and being able to analyze them and analyze the changes that we make. So this first video is just going to be focusing on how we can build a surface using a group of points. There are different ways that you can define a surface, and one of the most common ways is by using a group of points, a point group. So I have this imported in here. I was able to pull the points that we have in Rhino into Civil 3D. And so really once you have a point group in the program, you can use it to define a surface so that the surface goes along each of these spot elevations. Yeah, so each of these yellow dots represents a different height and along, this plan. So we know, like, at this point, we're looking down at a plan. At this spot in the plan, it's going to be this height. So we're basically going to create a surface that's a mesh over all these spot elevations, and it's going to create a surface to represent our clay model. So as far as creating the surface, what you'll first do is tell it, I want to build a surface, and then you'll attribute these points to that surface we create. So what you'll want to do is make sure that you have the tool space panel open. You can do that by just typing tool space in the command bar. And then under there's a toolbox window, a survey, settings, prospector. I'm on prospector here. So once again, just type tool space and then make sure that you're in prospector. And then you can expand, it's under point groups here. There's this surfaces icon. Right click on surfaces and then click create surface. And it has a drop down menu here, tin surface. It stands for triangular irregular networks. It's creating a surface through like a triangular mesh. And that's good for today. There's also grid surfaces, volume surfaces, but we're just going to do a tin surface for this. For the layer that we want it to be on, I just made a separate layer for my surface. And you can obviously modify that later, so no worries if you didn't create a new surface before opening up this box. And so just click OK. You can give the surface a name. I'll do like round surface for my name. You can give it any name that you want. I'm not going to do a description. And then style, I'll show you later how we can set like a style for how the contour lines are represented, but for now I'm just going to have it on standard. And then from there, so just really make sure that you have it on the layer that you want and you've given it a name. It's on tin surface. You can click OK. And right away we see nothing happens really, like it hasn't created a surface. So but it's created this little drop-down menu here under whatever name you gave your surface. So under ground surface, it has this drop-down. So it's under surfaces. I expand it. Then there's ground surface, expand that. And then we'll go under definition. Under definition, there's all these different ways that we can define our surface, and we are going to do it by point groups. So this is a really one of the more popular ways to create a surface is by a point group. There's also, by a set of contours, by boundaries, things like that. So we'll do point groups. So I'm going to right click on that and then click add. So once again, it's under surfaces, ground surface, definition, and then point groups. There's also a point groups up here. Make sure that you're clicking on this point groups down here under definition. So right click, then add. And you'll see here I only have one option. That's because I just have one group of points. If you were creating multiple surfaces and had multiple different groups in the same workspace, then that's where this would show up. But I just have all points, so I'll click OK. And then you'll see it makes this box surrounding all of the points. So this here is where my surface is, and so I can even like zoom in and see where it's getting higher and lower, things like that. But you'll notice from the plan view it's a little difficult to tell, just because I don't have any contour lines yet. So for the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how we can alter the appearance of our surface so that it's more readable and represented in the way that we want it to be. So, to change the display of the surface, what we'll do is we can collapse this definition menu here. We'll right click on ground surface and then edit surface style. So once again, it's under surfaces, ground surface, or whatever name you gave your surface. Right click on it and then edit surface style. There's all these different tabs. I like to first just make sure display is on. And then I'm going to turn on major and minor contours. You can click on the color here to set a different color. I would just, depending on what pen chart you're using, I know for Sight Systems last semester it was like red was the lightest color. So I'm going to set my minor contours so that they're red. And then for major contours, I could tell it I want my major contours to be cyan because that's a little bit darker. And you don't have to set it to red and cyan. You can do what colors work best for you. But for now, that's just what I'm going to pick. The border you can set to be a specific line weight. But for now, this is good. And then I'm also going to click on the contours tab. And I'm going to see where my contour intervals are. So under contour intervals, base elevation I want to be 0 feet. And then my minor intervals will be every 2 feet. So what this means is every 2 feet it's going to create a contour line. Commonly we'll do like 1 foot or 2 foot, but if you're doing like a very steep drawing, you might want it to be something like 10 feet so that the drawing isn't too busy. So the smaller this number is, the more busy the drawing will be, just because it's more contour lines. And then obviously, the more steep your drawing is, the busier the lines will be. So every 2 feet is what we decided was appropriate for this drawing. And then the major interval, what that just means is that it'll just be a thicker line weight, so that when somebody is reading your drawing, it's obvious, okay, this is every 10 feet, it's going to be a thick line weight. And so it just makes it a little easier to read. We have things like contour smoothing, smooth contours, false true. I'm gonna run it as false and we can see what that looks like, and then we can try smoothing it as well. But I'll just click OK for now, and then you'll see all these contours show up. So this is really a lot faster than the interpolation that we've been doing. But you can see just what all these contour signatures look like using this program, and it goes really fast that it creates these. And then you can also right click on it again, edit surface style. I'm going to see what happens, for example, if I wanted to say true for contour smoothing. And then it says, do I want to add vertices or spline curves? I'm going to say add vertices because we never do splines in Civil 3D or AutoCAD. They're just a little tricky to work with if you're working with multiple people. And so let's just say okay and see what that does. And then you'll notice it's a little bit smoother, not really by that much. So you can go in and alter these lines, but for now, just for the purposes of this tutorial, this is okay. I'm going to right click on this again. Some other things you can do is in the display you can show things like slopes, slope arrows. It calculates all this for you. Watersheds, for example. So in the display you can say like, oh, I want to show watersheds, and then there's this watershed tab. So they don't have that for every single one of these things, but for a lot of them, and it's just extra ways that we can edit them. And so I can say like, I want all of my flat area watersheds to show up in yellow, let's say, for example, or if we want it to be maybe a really thick line weight for some reason, we could click on one of our numbers that are higher on that scale. And then for our depression watershed, we want that to show up as, you know, we could just say like green and medium color, and you can change that color by just clicking on this little square there. So I'll click OK, and then what shows up are these lines representing where the watersheds are. And so like the green are depressions, gray is flat, and so forth. So that's a really quick way to analyze just where all of the water, the drainage is going. Another thing you can do, if I turn off watersheds and turn on slope arrows, this is under analysis. You can alter it so that for, oh sorry, click on this little square here. I can say I want rainbow, what number of ranges, range precision, this is okay. Yeah, this looks pretty good to me. You can just alter things like directions, how they're displaying, yeah, the type of arrow that it's using, and so forth. So I'll click OK. And there it switches from showing watersheds to showing slopes. And you can set different colors to show whether the slope is going up or down. So that's really interesting and nice to have and to use. Under analysis, slope arrows. Yeah, and you can set like a group of colors if need be, but normally we would use like a pen chart to set if we were wanting to print in color. But for now, that's good. We can show slopes and elevations, for example. And this is really overwhelming to look at. There's probably something strange that I have set up in here. So what I'm going to do is maybe take away elevations and see just the slopes. So yeah, I think it's getting like darker where it's the steepest. That's interesting. Yeah, so there's just, as you can see, there's just a lot of different ways that we can look through in edit surface style to just really look at how it's being displayed. I would just make sure, I think having the border and then the major and minor contours are really helpful at first. And then you can look through other things. And then we can also work to modify these edges so they're a little bit more curved. I know right now that they're on their softened edge setting, but we can also make them a bit more rounded. Something just to mention really quick, if you are, for example, drawing a curve to represent a contour line, let's say you're basing a contour off of a surface, you can click A for arc, enter, and it knows that you want, oh, sorry, I think I did something wrong. If you're clicking on curve, it first starts by making a polyline. So you can click, keep clicking, and then if you know that you want this corner to be rounded, you can click A, for arc, or just click on arc here, and then it'll be rounded. And that just makes it a little bit easier to smooth out edges, and then obviously you can set the radius to be smaller. This is obviously way more dramatic than we would probably need it to be. But I think that's something I didn't go over for our materials, and that just takes a little bit of practice too, of like getting it to look okay. But if you're trying to draw contours, I would suggest going curve, and then just start drawing your line, and then as soon as you want it to be a curved area, a curved line, you type A, oops, and then enter, and then you can set it to be how you want it to. One thing to keep in mind is make sure that you're not doing splines, because it just makes it a really complex line, and if you're sharing your document with other people, it's frustrating to use because there's so many little points. So I would just recommend using the arc tool if you're creating a surface using contours that you've drawn. But for now, this is just a quick explanation of the different ways that we can represent contours, and just how to create a surface, and then how we can represent contours, watersheds, things like that. I hope that this was helpful. Let me know if there's anything I can further clarify or go over, or if it's given you trouble. But just in summary, we can create a surface using a group of points, and then we can alter the appearance of the contours that that surface has created. We can either show contour lines where the watersheds are, different things like that. So it's a really helpful tool for creating surfaces. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.